Okay. Okay. So I've been brainstorming a little bit, trying to figure out what I'm making for my projects and stuff like that. Um, for the machine learning project, I wanted to kind of have a general video as to how I want to format it. So right now, I have the back end completed. I mean, mostly completed. I think the last thing I want to do is extra feature selection and parsing through more like computationally expensive algorithms, like XGBoost and stuff like that. So like XGBoost, gradient descent, um, probably like Ridge or Lasso, which I know like wouldn't be like incredibly computationally expensive in some cases, but like in cases where I have like I'd say right now on my laptop that I'm working on, I think I had a data set of 50,000 rows and about after like the hot one encoding, feature processing, stuff like that, cleaning up the data, it had about 800 columns. And this is, although like my processor is very good, I want this to be kind of like something that people can just run locally, and I have to think a little bit, just a little bit about like what their computers actually look like, because I mean, what's the point of making a tool if not many people can use it, right? Like, just seems a bit, far fetched. But this is the back end, and I've never been great at programming front end. It definitely takes me longer, but I want to be able to make kind of like a easy to use front end that people can just run locally, and be able to access everything in the back end without having to do much overhead. So all you have to do realistically is just upload the CSV file. Maybe if you need to make some specifications, and I made a manual override file for any cases where people like by their own intuition can tell that a feature is important to an outcome, or at the very least are curious to see how the outcome changes when you include the feature. There's a manual override file that I created, to where you just put the feature name, and the code also shows you all the removed feature names and stuff like that. So you'll be able to tell which ones you would want to write in that manual override file. So people just have to specify the actual CSV file that they're using and the anything in the manual override file, and that's all they need to do. That's the only overhead that they need to do. But what I'm realizing is front end design is well realistically pretty important, because like the problem is that when you start running it, right? So after you upload and it goes to running, this could cycle for a while. Like the loading aspect can cycle for a while, and frankly, like I think a lot of people would be curious during this time, like, oh, is my code even running? And so I thought about maybe making a loading wheel, but then, what's the point of making your own project if you don't overcomplicate it and think about making a cool way to do it? So for the front end, the back end of the front end, I'm using Flask API, which is what I'm most familiar with. And what I wanted to do was the general idea of the actual kind of like web page is that there's the upload button here, or like kind of like an upload area here, and then below that is going to be a pseudo terminal. It looks like a little ugly right now because obviously I don't have that much CSS knowledge, but it kind of looks like this, where there's just this upload bar and then there's this terminal, and what the terminal is going to do is it's going to output logs within the backend here. So logs here, and there will be an output. The problem is that it's not immediately intuitive as to how to get certain logs to automatically show up in HTML. You create, from what I understand, what I read yesterday, this is my first time doing this, or the second time using HTML and JavaScript in tandem together. However, kind of like my first time using it in this way, you create a, well, it's a kind of div class. I named it terminal. Right? So you create this div class in HTML, and then you use JavaScript to kind of like send information to terminal, or the terminal class object, using like terminal dot message, blah blah blah. This isn't actually a command. This is what I remember, like something similar from what I remembered writing yesterday. I don't think it's actually what I wrote, but it's something similar to this, where what you'll do is the Python will use something called Flask socket.io, which this is what I am familiar with. I have made TCP connections before, but this is essentially, from what I understand, this is my idea, because what struck this idea was I watched a video where the guy was making something that I made before in C, which was kind of a text chat thing that you could use. So if you were on localhost and then two localhosts connect to the same server, they would be able to type to each other and stuff like that, and then you could set up like a separate server, have it connect to that. Either way, it essentially just made it so that you could facilitate communication between two different parties or two different hosts and stuff like that. So the idea is, if I treat my backend as a party and then just connect it to this terminal kind of like server socket, I could send information here, and then there's no way for the user to send information back. At least nothing's coded for that. So then what would happen is, as the backend is going through its code, it would send messages to terminal, which would then be displayed in the pseudo terminal so that the user knows that the code is running still. That way people don't get impatient and click away, because there is the problem of very high dimensionality CSV files or data sets take a while to parse, especially with the algorithms that I'm using. Linear regression, pretty fast. Decision trees, also fairly fast, but random forests take a long time because you generate so many different so many different trees, and then you need to kind of evaluate them within it, and then also the cross-validation for algorithms that I'm using and stuff like that usually take a while after a bit. I do have a kind of like a quick feature selection. So what it does is, if it detects something like this or something in the ballpark of this may seem small to certain other data sets, but again, this may seem small in context of data analysis to certain labs and stuff like that. However, the idea is this should be usable for anybody at home, no matter what their peripherals or computer might look like, or what their hardware, not peripherals, what their hardware might look like. They should be able to run this relatively quick. So instead of 800 parameters and stuff like that, I had a kind of like a quick feature select, or I called it fast select, although it really is just another feature selection, where it first evaluates the mutual information of every column to the target column, so column to target column, and then uses a random noise generator to create another column. And then in theory, getting the mutual information to the target of the random noise should realistically be fairly low. Like it should give me like an average or a threshold that I can use to evaluate the other ones. So anything that falls below the threshold will not be, we can actually like evaluate for being removed, which but anything above is kept, right? So then we know for sure the mutual information that we want to keep, but then we need to evaluate the possible removal features. And from there, we look at the measured variance of each column. For continuous data, we look at the, what's it? So it's not variance, it's the correlation value, the Pearson correlation value for continuous data. And then for categorical data, we look at chi-square. And then if it's able to pass all of these tests, then we still keep it. But if it doesn't, we just drop it immediately. And what that did, actually, was it took this 800 columns to about 40. Since it's random, it sometimes varies, but it was about 45 to 60 features that are kept. And then before the mutual information, I actually tested without the mutual information. We would get probably a best result of around 96% cross-validation score, CV score. But then after using the mutual information, it goes back up to 99%. So, or sorry, not percentage, it's like just 0.96 versus 0.99. I don't think you can use percentage. I was measuring it with accuracy before, but I found out that that can be kind of an unreliable measurement. So yeah, this is generally the idea of the machine learning pipeline that I built. And what I'm working on right now is this front end to make it look nice, and so that people don't like upload their CSV file and then immediately click away. And then I need to also handle error parsing. But this is a lot of progress that I made within the past 3 days. So the last video I made was me like starting to rework everything for the project when it came to the pre-processing, the initial, like, so when I made my last video, what would happen in the back end was that it would just immediately pre-process and remove features based on certain kinds of parameters, such as parameters that just didn't work. It worked well for small data sets, but it just did not translate well to general case scenarios or large data sets. So I updated it, created an initial pre-processing, or like an initial clean that would convert everything to that's usable kind of columns. And then from there, I actually decided to immediately send that to the learning algorithms so that we could get kind of an initial polling of what the algorithm would look like if it kept all of its features. And then after that, it would do the feature or the fast selection. And then now I need to work on the, well, I guess I could call it slow selection with the more complex algorithms after the fact. So yeah, that's generally my progress so far. I still want to work on my personal website, but something that I realized right now is that I want to finish this project for sure. It's just that sometimes I think there's like a slight level of burnout that you would feel after working on something intensely for multiple days. Because like, it just felt like there was really no good place to end it, where after I finished the algorithm, I was like, okay, what do I do now? Is it done? Do I feel like it's done? And the answer was always no. Like, the answer was always like, okay, I can do a little bit more here. I can definitely move this around, kind of figure this part out. And it was fun and all while doing that. It's just that I realized that it kind of gets me too hyper-focused on one thing. Like, what I'll end up doing is I'll be working on this pretty intensely, like figuring out reading different kinds of methods, or what's the best method, or what, I could use in order to make kind of like a better pipeline. I'll get way too hyper-focused on that research, and then I'll end up like not doing other things. Like, I'll still like cook for myself and clean up my room at the end of the day, but I won't be applying to jobs, or I won't even consider touching my other projects, or the ones that I said that I would kind of work on a little bit more. Because I also realize that this project doesn't really do much for me when it comes to like the job market. Like, it's nothing new, it's nothing super innovative. Sure, the front end might be impressive, but realistically the back end is a lot of like, I feel, is kind of like a lot of wrapper functions for statistical analysis tools. that have already been made, and it doesn't really force me to think. Like, I think the most that I've done here is research into how these analysis like works, and I'm trying to be a programmer. I'm not trying to be a statistician, or is that how you say it? Like a statistician, I guess. I'm not trying to be that. I'm just trying to understand numbers better, so that I can kind of interpret output and signals a lot more efficiently. But I realized the actual meat and potatoes of programming itself is kind of like understanding how computers send information between either each other or within itself. So, and how to do that reliably. And this project doesn't really encapsulate that. This is kind of like just a almost like a side project of something that I found really interesting, which is, you know, machine learning and predictive models, and wanting to kind of get my head around that. So, you know, like, it ultimately is, I think, a passion project where I started it because I was interested in it, and I'm finishing it because I'm interested in it. But I need to kind of think a little bit more about, like, oh, what would employers want to see? What would other people really want to see from a programmer? And what can I make that genuinely expands on my skills? But this was a more in-depth kind of explanation as to what I've been up to these past few days. I think I'm proud of the progress that I've made with this project, and I really do want to see it to its fruition. I'm just kind of like also in the middle of figuring out, like, okay, but what can I do that would really help me kind of like outrun this financial clock that I'm seeing is slowly like ticking down, you know? It might not be close to zero just yet, but it's definitely a little nerve inducing every time I think about like that, you know, the second hand counting down to zero. So yeah, I hope I didn't record too much. I can't see the actual window this time, so I have no idea how long I went. But yeah, that's the video. Oh God, my knees.